Dub strings, or like, you know, like a really long held pad, really help fill out sections in tracks where there's not much going on and you want to create a bit of atmosphere, but you don't want to take away any of the attention from the main parts. So I like to put in dub strings in places like breakdowns or maybe just before a drop. I think it definitely gives like the impression that there's a little bit of tension and a little bit of anticipation. And so it's definitely worth working on. Sorry about that. So I'll just play my dub string now. I'll play it with some of my vocals as well, just to give you an idea of maybe a section of the track where there'll be less going on, so no bass line. Now it's very easy to make a very boring dub string, so what I want to show you is how I layer my dub strings to get a little bit more movement, just keeping it really subtle, but just making it feel a little bit more authentic rather than you just chose a string sample and then put it in. So what I like to do is use a sort of a real sounding string sample first. So I found this Studio Strings in Logic. You guys, again, if you don't have Logic, Native Instruments does some great strings. There's loads of plugins out there, or you can just grab a sample, a loop from the internet. So have a listen to this. Let me just turn everything off first. So it sounds alright. It's got this nice feeling to it, but it feels a bit old school. It's a bit kind of grainy. But there's not much movement, it kind of just stays there and it feels a little bit boring. So what I like to do is use a sort of a retro sounding synthesizer. This is the retro synth in Logic. Something that sounds a little bit old school, and then layer it with that. So let's have a listen to this. Now can you hear the movement in this one here? It actually sounds pretty close to a real string. Let's listen to the studio string again. Great, but just a bit boring. And then the retro string. Now the way I've added that movement is actually by using the LFO and the vibrato. So you might have an LFO that you'll be able to assign to change the vibrato. It might not be core vibrato, but in this synthesizer it is. Now the LFO here is changing the cutoff, and the vibrato is changing the pitch of the sound. So let me just take that out. I'll show you what it sounds like. It still sounds quite interesting, to be honest. Still got some nice movement there. Cool. So I added a little bit of LFO. I'll overdo it, just so you can hear what it sounds like. So just a little bit of that. Now, when I do add this, I make sure that I'm using an unsynced rate, so a free rate, because that makes it a little bit looser, less predictable, and kind of more human. And then a little bit of vibrato. And I'm using triangle waveforms on both of these oscillators. And you can kind of hear, and it's super overkill, but you can hear that going out of pitch every so often, and it's not something that you're really going to be able to tell when you're playing it in the background of the track. It's just something that's going to add to the atmosphere. A lot of people get scared, like, oh, but what if someone notices that it's out of tune? I think it's actually about adding those imperfections that make things a little bit more human, and then people kind of connect with that a bit better. So I also detuned actually the second oscillator about 8 cents down, so they're not exactly the same tuning, which is why we already have a little bit of movement. So listen to the studio string by itself again, and then with the retro string. So the studio string adds that grit and that kind of air. It's got a lot of background noise, whereas the retro string adds the movement to it and brings it, just makes it sound a little bit more authentic, a little bit more old school. So processing wise, I kept it pretty simple. I added an EQ. I'll start again with this. I just want to go from scratch. So always in with the low cut first. It's keep some of that sort of white noise from the studio string. Just a little bit tidier. And then I just took down this frequency here ever so slightly. Seemed to kind of make it a bit smoother. Felt like there's a bit of a build up there. Next I added a compressor with sidechain. Sidechain adds so much movement. It's really nice. You don't have to do this actually on your dub stream, but I felt like it worked on the one that I recorded. Just helps it kind of bounce the track. And sort of it plays around, it plays more of a sort of rhythmic part in the background when you have a bit of sidechain. I use this enhanced EQ from Native Instruments, which is based on a Pultec EQ. Great for sort of boosting high frequencies really smoothly. I also did a bit of a cut as well, just getting rid of anything that I didn't need. So I don't know, it's got some, even when you just turn it on, it's got this kind of processing that makes it feel a bit more old school. So that was quite nice. And then I use this driver, and I've never used this before actually, but I found the setting called Dusty Needle. Now it's not making a huge difference, but again, it's kind of making it feel a bit more, it's reducing the quality, which is kind of what I want, because I feel like that's actually quite cool. And rather than things sounding really digital and clean all the time, we can use these kind of distortion plugins and these vintage modeled EQs to help us make things sound, a little bit warmer and a little bit darker. So really, really nice. Okay, cool. So there you have it. There's your dub string. Couple of layers. Use a real string and then use your synth string. And make sure you have a go at playing around with things like LFO and pitch modulation, and then put the two together and see, try and decide what string is giving you what, which one's giving you the body of the sound and the grit, and the other, which one's giving you the movement. And I think you end up with something much more interesting rather than just putting in a very simple, regular string sample.
Remember, at Sample Tools by CR2, we also offer a mix and mastering service. Just head over to www.sampletoolsbycr2.com, click on the Mastering tab, and you'll find our range of services there.